I went off to college. My dad died from cancer when I was 19, and I was already in college. I finished high school early, and I went to college, and I was barreling through college, and then my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he had gone through several surgeries, and it looked like it was going to be a possibility that he would make it through, but then it didn't seem that they had caught it early enough, and my father passed. I went through a real traumatic depression for about 2 years following that. I finished school and was able to finish school with a double major, and I was ready to run away and do my own life. And so the only thing I could think of was getting out of New Orleans and going someplace else. A geographical cure is what we call it, where we think if we change our location, then it'll be better wherever we're going. My mother had died when I was 9, so my father was basically my only parent. And so at 19, 20, 21, I ended up signing a contract with North American Van Lines. And they took me to Houston to do an understudy as a CPA because I graduated with an undergrad in accounting. Back then, CPA, you could become a CPA if you trained under a CPA. And so that was my goal, that was my long-term plan. Well, I got to Houston, and Houston is big. I mean, New Orleans, we're a city, but we're a big little city, if you know what I mean. I mean, everybody, you can talk to people for a few minutes, and you know somebody that they know, or you're even related to them. And so I got to Houston, and I got lost in the grandeur of that city. I had this job, and it was a lot of pressure in the beginning, and I was a stranger, and I was a young woman, and I didn't have really a family or a safety net there. And so this gentleman invited me out, and it was not a good situation. I was very naive, very young, very, very innocent. I was still a virgin at that time. And I went out with this gentleman, and we went to dinner at his home. And the evening went very badly for me. I ended up being brutally raped that night. And I managed to hold my clothes on me as I ran down the street when I got out of his home. I didn't have shoes on, and I didn't have any of my things. I managed to just get out. I ran down the street, and I got to a convenience store. And the gentleman that was there waiting, he was there at the cashier. I was holding my clothes sobbing, and he could see that I had marks and bruises, and he said, let me call the police. Let me call the police. And I said, no, whatever you do, don't call the police. Just get me a cab. And he said, no, I need to call the police. And we went back and forth in this, and then finally he did get a cab, and he went out, and I walked me out to the cab and put me in that cab that night, and that cab driver drove me home and never charged me. The gentleman at the cashier paid for me to get home that night. God even keeps hand on us when we're running, and I was running from God. I was running from the call of God on my life. I was running from everything that I knew to be true about who God was because I was raised in church. I got home that night, and the cab driver turned to me and said, look, it's okay. Just flash the light on your porch when you get inside so I'll know that you're in your house. And he said, I'm not going to follow you. And it took me a while to really understand that. But I understood what he was saying. I went to work on Monday. I don't know, that night I got into my apartment, and I climbed in the bathtub and just turned on the water and let it fill up, and I just sat in the tub all night. I remember at some point crying out to God and going, God, I really don't understand this, because You see, I'm the good girl. I was the one that had crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. And, you know, evil has no respecter of persons. It's not something that they don't respect you because you've done something right or good. It comes, and it is an enemy of your purpose and your plan, and that God has called you to. At some point during the night, I got up and I crawled into my bed and wrapped myself up in my bedspread. I woke up the next day, and it was Sunday, and I got up and I did my regular routine. I got my things ready for the week. I packed my lunches. I got everything planned out for that week. Because my dad had taught me as a young woman a good work ethic. You weren't late for work. You always showed up. Even if you were sick, you went to work. And so the only way I could cope with what had happened to me was to just go to work that week. The first person that I had to pass when I entered that office, when I entered the facility there, was the man that had raped me. He was the #1 director of sales, and he was the goose that laid the golden eggs. He was a go-getter. He was a powerhouse when it came to doing his job. And I remember, I can see it, if I close my eyes, I can see the look on his face that day when I walked in. He looked at me and he smiled and said, "Good morning," as if nothing had ever happened. And to be honest with you, that was really okay with me. I wanted to forget what had happened. I just wanted to go on. I wanted to get into normal mode. I wanted to travel normal and pretend it didn't happen. A few weeks passed. I was understudy to a CPA there, and her name is Glee, and she was a tremendous teacher, and I learned so much from her. But she had these crystal blue eyes. And one day I was standing, I said, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't seem to shake this flu. I've got a flu." And she looked at me and she said, is it possible that you're pregnant?" Honestly, folks, it had never crossed my mind. I didn't know that morning sickness was part of being pregnant. And she looked at me and she spoke these words to me. She said, "I want you to sit down and I want you to listen to me. You are a young woman that has a bright future before her. You're smart, you're liked, you have a good sense of business with you. So I'm going to give you some advice as your superior. I think you need to go in. They have opened these clinics, and you need to go down the street on Saturday morning and get this taken care of, and I will pay you. I will give you the money to get this done. You don't want this on your record. You don't want this to follow you. You don't need this to interrupt your life." And at that point, I didn't know what she was talking about. And that's why I work so hard at telling my story, is because the greatest vacuum that I had as a young woman was the fact that there was no education about what she was telling me to do. I really didn't understand what she was telling me to do at that point. And I know that sounds terribly naive, but I'm 65 years old. And so looking back, if you go back to when I was 21, that's a few years back, and it was a different world that we lived in. Very, very sheltered. And so she said, "I'll give you the money in the morning. You need to go down Saturday and have this taken care of." The next day she came in and she handed me a wad of $20 bills. I'll never forget the wad of $20 bills. It was $240 is what it would cost me to have this procedure done, and then everything would be fine. We could get into normal. We could just go ahead and get into normal. Well, that Saturday morning I got up early and I went to the clinic, and I sat with that wad of $20 bills in my hand, and I was a young woman alone in a clinic that I didn't understand what was going on. My life was spinning. I was a victim of a brutal rape, but also I was a victim of being pregnant, which I didn't even have my whole brain wrapped around at that point. And when I'm nervous, I vibrate. You know, my legs, I kind of bounce, and I'm sitting there in the chair, and this lady comes and sits next to me, and she reaches over and she puts her hand on my knee, and she said, "It's okay, don't be so nervous, don't be nervous. I've had 5 of these done, and you will be just fine in a couple of days. This is Saturday, by Monday you'll be just fine." I don't know what took over at that point. All I can explain is it had to be God. It had to be the Holy Spirit. That literally, I bolted up out of the chair and I ran out of that clinic. And I got in my car, and isn't it funny the things that you remember? I was driving a white Le Mans Buick. Isn't that funny that you remember? I'm in this car, and I'm sitting there as this young woman, snot, tears, screaming at God, and I'm pounding the steering wheel, going, "This is not my fault. I do not deserve this. This is going to take the next 9 months of my life. Do you understand?" There was a man that walked in front of my car, and he kind of looked at me like, "Does she need help? Who is she talking to?" I had that baby, and it was one of the things that God set up a net for me. Have you ever been in that, where God just takes you from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and you don't know how you get there? Do you know what I'm talking about? How he lines things up. Listen, you're not here tonight by accident, because God lined you up to be here. And I want you to know, when I share my testimony in rooms of women, and many women. I know the statistics. That probably anywhere from 50 to 60% of the women sitting in the room listening to my testimony didn't get up and run out of the clinic. But there's grace for that. The blood of Jesus heals those wounds. So I'm not here to bring any condemnation. But you must understand that we must be a voice in the darkness in our world today. Because a pregnancy is a life. It's not a physical experience. It's not just something that happens by accident. I believe that God designs every child that comes into this world. I believe that with my whole heart. God lined it up for me. And I ended up in Oklahoma City. Say Oklahoma City. They cannot cook there. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, it's just white bread and pork and beans. I thought if they gave me another can of pork and beans, I was gonna write Campbell and go, "Stop." They've consumed all the pork and beans in Oklahoma City. But I remember the day that I was giving birth to this child. I had this child inside of me, and I was growing, and I was feeling this baby move, and there was part of me, I was just angry. But I had the closest relationship with God during those 9 months than I had ever had up to that point in my life. God and I had some long talks. One day I was getting up from a nap, and as I woke up from my nap, the baby moved. And I remember putting my hands on top of my stomach, and I was ready. I mean, I was maybe 3 weeks away from delivering this child, and I had put my hands on my stomach as this baby was moving, and I heard the voice of God. God speaks. He does. He talks. And he said, "This is not your gift." And God doesn't have to say a whole lot. He can just say like 3 or 4 words, and it's like, wow, everything goes from black and white to Technicolor. I mean, it's like, what? And I remember sitting up in that bed and going, oh my gosh, this is someone's child, but it's not mine. I called the people that I was staying with. I spoke to the doctor who was my OBGYN and who was going to be giving birth to this child. And you have to understand, back then, when I went to the doctor, they took me to the OBGYN. They took me in the back door because I was an unwed mother. Does anybody else in here, are you that old? Do you remember the stigma? Oh, it was bad. It was bad. It wasn't pretty. I spoke to the doctor, and the doctor said, we have a couple that has adopted through us before, and God lined it up. I gave birth. I was in labor for 24 hours. That was not just anything. That was a child that was born. But soon as I gave birth, they put me to sleep. So I did not know if I had a boy or a girl. I didn't know if the baby was healthy or not. I just was put to sleep. I woke up the next day in a room in that hospital in Edmond, Oklahoma. And the lawyers walked in along with the doctors, and a family friend of mine, and walked in and handed me the papers, and they asked me to sign the papers, and I signed the document, and then they took a black marker and they blocked out my name because it was a private adoption, and that child was to never know who its birth mother was. 2 weeks later, I came back to New Orleans, and God gave me a grand life. My husband is an amazing man. Amazing. And I had to share with him when we started dating and becoming very serious, and I said, you need to understand, this is who I am. This wasn't just a blip on the radar of my life. This was part of my life. And I'll never forget him looking at me, and he goes, why would that adoption, why do you think that would be a problem for me? I'm adopted. I'm telling you, God doesn't mess up things. We get anxious, we get in a rush, and we think we have to hurry up and fix things. But if we could just slow down, and when we hit bumps in the road, when we have things that come, evil comes against us, tragedy comes against us, if we could just take a breath and let God move, He will. He will. Well, fast forward 30 years. My phone's ringing one day, and I'm running in. I have 2 children, and I'm running in to answer the phone before the answering machine picks it up. Y'all remember answering machines? And, yeah, it goes beep. And I ran in, and I grabbed the phone, and I picked up the phone, and they said, is this Kathleen Beeson? And I said, yeah, in another lifetime. Who is this? And I said, who is this? Who is this? And she kind of chuckled. She goes, she said, I'm just calling from Oklahoma City, and I wanted to know, did you give birth to a baby boy in 1980? 1975, I'm sorry, 1975? I don't know. Who are you? She sounded like Aunt Bee. You remember from Mayberry? She had this real twang, and I know she was having pork and beans that night. I know it for sure. But she talked to me, and I was speechless because, see, I didn't know I had a boy. And she said, I met your son. He is an amazing young man. He's a businessman here in the city of Oklahoma City, and he's just, he wants to meet you. And I felt like, I don't know. I had all this stuff going on inside of me. I didn't know what to think. Because I've watched 60 Minutes. And I've seen the bad situations. And I'm thinking, really, I don't know. Do I want to? Do I not? I said, I'm going to have to get back with you. I can't give you an answer right now. She said, oh, darling, I wouldn't tell you it would be good if it wasn't good. I'm going, okay, I'll call you back. Aunt B, give me your number. That woman called me every day for almost 2 weeks. She was like a bill collector. I mean, she was relentless. She would, but she was very, very, very kind. So my husband and I talked about it, we prayed about it, and finally we said okay, and I got his phone number from Aunt B, my son's phone number, and I said, I'll give him a call myself. I want to call him. Oh, I'm telling you what, I almost wore a hole in that piece of paper waiting, thinking, what do I say? Hi, we've never met, but I'm your mother, biologically. Well, I did make the phone call, and the phone rang and rang and rang, and I'm almost like, yes, I can leave a message. What do I say? And, hello? I froze. And I said, hi, I understand you've been looking for me. And there was this long pause of silence. And he began to cry, and he said, Mom, well, to tell you the truth, I was not expecting that. A few months later, he came to visit him and his wife, and they came to New Orleans, and we met them at the airport, and he would not give me a picture because he said, I know what you look like thanks to the internet. He said, but you're not going to know who I look like, and let's see if you can pick me out. That was cruel, right? But that was something I would have done, so I totally understood it. He got off the plane, he was walking through the gate at Moyzan Airport, and it's not Moyzan Airport anymore, right? Louis Armstrong, I'm sorry, I'm showing my age. How many of you remember it was Moyzan Airport at one point? Thank you. He came walking off of the runway, off the gate, and I told my husband, I said, that's him. And he goes, how do you know? I mean, how do you know? He's got a baseball cap on. And I said, that's him, because his gant is just like my father's. He had this certain gant that he walked. And I said, that's him. And that man, out of the crowd, walked straight up to me. And my husband's filming the whole thing, going, unbelievable. Unbelievable. So I took him to Mother's for breakfast. Sounded apropos, right? And we had breakfast, and as we were sitting there, I had a gift for him, and I pulled it out and I explained to him, I said, I really don't know what to say, but I need to say this to you. There's never been a day that I didn't think about you. And I've prayed for you every day. Because when you give a gift, and that's what God told me that day, that this was not my gift. When you give a gift, you really give it. And I gave that gift that day to the Lord and to that family. And I said, but I never forgot your birth, and I never forgot that you were part of me somewhere in the world. And I said, but this, if I can give you anything, this is who I am. And it was a necklace of a cross with a key at the end of it. And I said, this is the center of who I am. It's the answer to everything. And I said, every day I prayed for you, I entered in my journal, baby in the column, in the margin, and I would spell it B-A-B-E. And I would not spell it B-A-B-Y, but B-A-B-E, and I would make a capital E, and I would circle it several times, because I had 2 children, And I didn't want them to wonder why I always had baby written in the margin, thinking I was wanting to have another child. And his wife stood up from the table at Mother's and walked away. And I thought, I haven't even known them an hour, and I've done something wrong. And he looked at me, and his eyes were full of tears, and he looked down at the gift, and his wife walked back and said, you have no idea, do you? And I said, I guess I don't. His nickname is E. His whole life, he has been known by E. And he was on the football team as quarterback, and they always called him Baby, because he has a baby's face. You see, nothing that you give to God is ever gone. It's never lost. It's never forgotten. I know that women that seek another avenue, it's because they don't understand their options. I was her. I had no clue what I was doing that day at that clinic. And most women that go through a sonogram and they actually hear that heartbeat and they see that baby on that screen, that's one more step towards them reevaluating their decisions. We've got to have a center for life. We've got to have many centers for life, because they are lives everywhere. Baby E and I are very close. We talk almost every week. And, you know, we've spent hours visiting about the wonderful life he had. His mom and dad are amazing people. They send me Mother's Day gifts every year because of their gratitude for giving that child up, giving the gift of Eric. Every child is a gift. Every child. You say, well, what do you feel women deal with when they have abortions? I'm a counselor. I've been a counselor for over 30 years. I've counseled many women that have gone through abortions. And I can honestly say that I've never met one woman who was thankful that she did it. Not one. No one tells those women what they're doing, but they feel it when it's done. And it's something that they carry for a long time. I want you to know it has been my privilege, and this is my passion. I've written Oprah. There's a bunch of, I had to cancel my subscription to her magazine, and finally I thought I'm going to write a letter. And I did, and I got a lot of feedback from it. Actually, a lot of pushback from it. Because there was an article, and I'm sure most of you have heard that there's a phase now on that they are proud of their abortion, and there's actually a hashtag where women are actually posting that they're proud that they had an abortion. Such foolishness, because I know the truth. I know the truth. This is a vital ministry in our society today. And I want to say that you, being a part of this Center for Life, you're my hero. I want to say thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because you don't know who you've saved. We maybe never know. But providing a place for education and for hope, it must be. We must be vigilant to provide that place. Thank you so much for letting me share my life with you tonight. And I want you to know that sometimes life is hard. Well, life is hard. Let me just say it that way. And everyone in this room is dealing with something that you would like to say, man, I wish I could just get out of this. I want to pray for you tonight. May I? May I pray for you? Because I want you to know that the same God that met me in my time of pain will meet you. Will you bow your heads for just a moment? Thank you, God. You're such an amazing God. You are a God of love, compassion. And God, you know every situation in this room tonight. You know the beginning and you know the end. And you know everything in between. And God, I just ask you right now that you would pour your peace, your river of peace on each heart and each life in this room tonight. Jesus, we ask you to be our rescuer. We surrender to you to be our Redeemer. And Lord, we surrender to you to be our rebuilder. God, I ask you that you meet each one of these people in this room in a very intimate and personal way. Speak to their hearts and open each ear in this room to be able to hear your voice, oh God. In Jesus' name I pray. God bless you.